I can see why John asked me to become MC today. You guys are unruly and so distance. I'm not going to use the microphone, I'm probably loud and lift. Look, I want to thank everyone for coming along today. It's been a long 3 years. Unfortunately, Max isn't able to be with us today, but he's here with us in spirit and he's equal to us as well. We wish you well, Max. We hope you get a lot of feedback today. There's also the video part of today's event, so we hope you will get the chance to see that. Last time we were in this room was in November 2019. Neville entertained us with his presentation. And probably back to the Indian cricket team here today. He's in Australia at the moment for the T20. So I look forward to Australia beating the line. I also want to thank especially Terry and John Ridge for organising not only today, but the last couple of years been very chaotic in the world. We've had 2 lunches publicised, we've had people wanting to come along, and we've had to cancel because of COVID. And I want to thank Gary Jackson, who's here today. He was our online speaker in 2020, and Ben Hoffman, who isn't here today, was our speaker in 2021. I thank those 2 people for keeping the tradition going, even if it was online and not face-to-face. I think the face-to-face is very important for us. You've also got, most of you, a book, and I want to thank Glenn and John Miller for providing that book. It's a fantastic book. It's called All Systems Go, the First 50 Years in the Australian Software Industry. What's fantastic about it, unlike the old technology books we had, it's not about the hardware companies, and it's not about the technology per se, it's about the people that are the pioneers of software. And there's articles written by and referring to dozens of people like John Cruikshank, Peter Grady, Tom Hotchkiss, and Peter Peppercock. So please read that book, it's enjoyable. I enjoy it. I'm a very short attention span, and the chapters are short. You can have a great reader and do it quite easily. Also on the table is a page reflecting the initiatives of the ACS Foundation. It's about women of STEM. And what it is it's the initiative to create financial systems for women from diverse backgrounds to help them get into the industry and succeed in the industry. So I congratulate the ACS Foundation on that initiative. And if anyone wants to be involved with it, if anyone wants to be able to donate to it, please see John. We've got the sheet there to reference. As far as today is concerned, we are going to be having our entrees in a few moments, then followed by the main course. We're going to have the main course after Len's spoke, but we thought we'd better do it before he speaks. We may go forever if we don't want to. So the lunch sheet is we're going to have the entree, then the main course, then I'll introduce Len, and then we'll close up and have dessert. And what was fantastic to see is communicating, seeing people you've got to speak for 3 or 4 years, and it's about friendship and networking, and it's so very good to see you all. Thank you for coming. I hope you've enjoyed your meal. Those that have the lamb shank probably wondering how big bloody lamb was. Fish was pretty good on it, I had it. Time for our speaker, and I'm not sure how one introducing the doyen of the industry. A man that's been in the industry for over 60 years. I looked at his LinkedIn profile, he wrote it himself. It highlights that Glenn's really only had 6 corporate careers in his 60 years. It surprised me. He started with New Zealand Post and Telegraph in 1959, when I was really short. His other 5 careers spanned from as little as 1 year with CSC. I congratulate him lasting that long. And 22 years as Vice President for the IBC, and that was a fantastic period of time. I'm sure he'll talk about that. And then he had his own business dialogue for 45 years. In between, he had successful careers with General Electric and CompuTech until CFC took over CompuTech and later last 1 year. But it was during his time with CompuTech that I first met Glenn. And then I used to catch up a lot with him when he was at IDC in Berry Street, because we had a common interest. It was the pub next door, Rag and Banish. And I think he's still at home away from home for Glenn. We spent the way all night together with both parts. Glenn, we look forward to your presentation. We look forward to hearing 60 years in half an hour.
Hi, Frank. Great to see you all here. Typical Max to be a member, you have to take. And that was part of the early criteria. So I still have my original target, Max, which I cherish enormously. Max, we wish you were here and we hope you're well. And we look forward to sending a video and some comments to you after this event. There's a lot to cover in something like this. I mean, we started to look at it and you listen to the conversations around the table, particularly on the table that I'm on, where a guy by name, you may remember Lionel Singer. He comes up every 2 minutes of events that they remember from Lionel. Lionel was always great and inspirer, sort of people we need today that is out there as a character. And Sue and I used to see him shopping on Saturday morning and yell across the street, everything else near your office, just around the corner. Today, what's come about is that when we did the looking at who the icons were of the industry now, 3 years ago, I might add, before COVID, just as COVID was started, we got enormous responses. I think we had 400 names put up. And when you look at those numbers, there, a lot of them are that hardware generation type thing. But we need to take that more into the new areas. So the book that some of you have got, I'm sorry we've run out of the book, but it's going up on Amazon. It'll be up there in a few months' time, and you'll be able to access it and look at it. But it's very inspirational, and I enjoyed working with John Miller on that, looking at all these different companies that came about in the 80s. And again, it's recognising the people that were doing well, were changing different areas, moving in from hardware to the software environment, and taking that to another level for Australia. And we still need to keep doing it. So it's looking at the past, but also now inspiring the future of saying we've got a whole lot of new companies out there that are doing tremendous work around the world. It's a different environment. It's cloud, it's data analytics, it's all sorts of different areas. But there's some very inspiring people there. And I'll talk about a few of those. But when we look back at the industry over the, whatever you like to say, 50 or 60 years, I started off my career next door here in GE. And this, I think, then was like a Harvey Norman or something, this building. And it was quite interesting. But I walked down York Street when I arrived from New Zealand, looking at all the showrooms. And the showrooms had great big computers in there and everything else. And the last one I went to was GE, and I started the next day as a technical writer. And it was rather interesting, because I wasn't a writer, it never happened. But on the other side of it, it was a new light and a new way of looking at things. And we set up this bureau, we had a punch card operation, we were doing all the work at the Opera House. We did the Hobart race, first time ever that was monitored and checked out, Snowy Mountains, University of Queensland. And it was really an interesting period in our life. We were looking for staff in the same way that we're looking for people today, where we wanted people to come in and be trained. And it was a showroom. As you walked up and down York Street, there was Burroughs, there was NCR, there was all these people that were in that street. Look at it today, they're all moving up to the Quarry Park, and they're all moving back into Sydney or somewhere close to the Reagan Furniture. And we have you again there, by the way, for all of you on the first Tuesday in December. It's the usual walk-in, walk-out lunch. So we never know how many people are going to come. And of course, through COVID, we couldn't do it that way. But now it's on. So when you look back over that 40, 50, 60 years, these are the sort of people that get together. And Max, to his credit, the way he did it with this event was amazing. I have to say, Frank probably doesn't remember this, but we were at the pub in North Sydney. What was it called? I forgot the name of it now. We had this celebration for the journalist that was around. Frank, he was the editor of the Australian newspaper. And we also had other attendees. Diana Pearce was there. Anne Garnsey from Nattles was there. And Frank Gleeson. You all know Frank. Frank was ex-Kevin Packer and Fraxer. And also, of course, Max was there. Max used the occasion to tell me that IDC had the numbers wrong. We had it wrong many, many times over lunches and things like that. We went to debates. So I said to Max, what were the real numbers for mini computer installs from digital? And he gave me the numbers. I then agreed with Max's data, and I went back and sold it to him as a subscription service. Gladly he accepted, and that was Max. So Max then became the organiser of, during the lunch it was suggested that we needed to get together like we are here today. And Max said, okay, I'll look after it. I've got a Max computer at home, and I'll put the stuff on there. And that's what he did. He maintained that until a couple of years ago, and then to his support from John Rich. Where are you, John? There you are. John then took over the general administration with Kerry and Frank, and we decided to keep the event going. We had Neville as a speaker, we had Gary Jackson as a speaker, there's Ian Opperman was a speaker. Lots of people came forward to talk at the event, but it was more just getting together with everybody and keeping it going. But a lot of people didn't like the expression computer old-timers. I'm not an old-timer anymore, they say. And you say, well, hang on, you're not coming down in age, you're going up in age. So then we thought about how do we go in the future with this sort of as a name, and maybe we've got to change it to computer new-timers or something like that. But Max became the organiser. We had lots of good early speakers. Frank Linton Simpkins, he came back and spoke. We also had the famous Harry Douglas from Daytech. And then we had Malcolm Goldfinch, which you may not remember, but he worked for Unisys and gave one of the first presentations of commercial computing that I can remember. Graham Phillips could also remember. And we went through all of that. At those events we had, Max used to lug in. We had tables, computers and equipment and whatever. It was just incredible. He and John Dean did that, and it was a very significant amount of museum computers, museum material. So when we went from there, we talked then a lot about the early days of companies like, obviously IBM, so around quite a bit in those days. We also talked about control data, Data General, Sun, ICL, and Data General. Wayne Fitzsimmons was supposed to be here today. Unfortunately, couldn't make it out of Melbourne. And companies like Silicon Graphics. So it was very much around the hardware area. And then, when you look at John Miller's book, and we looked into that, it was really when the first commercialisation of software started to take place. And the the Australian companies jumped in on that bandwagon. So in that book, and I won't go too far into it, but there are 10, 15 companies, several people here from NASA and people like that. And it was tremendous the way that grew and where they went offshore. And then you look at that today, and they moved on, sold the companies and those things. So the book covers some great stories. It's the sort of thing that we're looking and hoping that we can do with events like this. When we think about capturing the past and inspiring the future, they do a similar thing in London, like we've got here now. It's a black tie here. People as sirs or ladies. It's been taken to a new level. But it's very, very well done. And they love to get together, like you've been to talk to colleagues and people they haven't seen or met in some time. We then were asked, why don't we do it in Australia? And that was when we did that first icon study, looking at who are the people out there that we should be talking to. They've taken it to another level, and we're hoping we can do it here by videoing people. And we've taken photographs of people out of different magazines, but videoing people and getting their views and their comments. It's not just one or two people, it's quite a few people that have had experience, different experiences, and talk about the past. And it's very inspirational. When you look at capturing the past, you look at the advances in information technology that have really transformed our lives, transformed our jobs, and through COVID and all the changes that are taking place now, it's a different game, it's a different environment and different way to be looked at. But certainly it's transformed commerce, education, employment, manufacturing, government, science, engineering, mining, and everything else. So historically, when you look at the IT industry, it's very important as part of Australia's future. Where we sit, where we're going, what we're going to be doing in the future. We have to get that message across to a lot of political parties. We need to work together to deliver. And that is where we're going to ask people to contribute to the 300 words as to what they think is needed and how we should take that to the next level. So, technology innovation, we're aware of the hardware side of things. We used to run the event up at Terrigal, which Gary Jackson remembers very well. I think he fell off the yacht there one day, as Gary always did. It was one of those events where it attracted 300, 350 people. 90% of them were from the financial services area, the major enterprises in Australia, and we had probably only half a dozen to a dozen vendors. We did that for 4 years in a row. It's just tremendous in the way that operated. And that was at the time when things were changing, in the 50s and the 60s, into the new area that Max talks about all the time, the mini computer area, where digital was very strong as the number 2 player in Australia. And that came into a new area. But only the fittest have survived through this. If you look back through that history, you look at the people and the companies of the past, it's a different game. And then we came out of that, where it changed into a new environment, and really only the fittest survived. A lot of companies were taken over, a lot of companies were moved offshore, a lot of people looked at different areas, and then there was sort of changes in leadership that took place in that sector. Excuse me. Then we started to move into areas like big data, mobile, cloud computing, social media, and all these that are impacting every business today. So a new generation was then arriving on the scene. And this transformation area was again another period that we all saw or witnessed, or most of us did anyway. So from my point of view, mapping and tracking all of this through ADC, through publishing, the bus report and everything else, we saw a totally different picture of that. And when you look at it today, we've got Stuart Corner here, your Wake Stuart student. He won the Journalist Award last week. A long-term journalist for quite a long time. Stuart's practiced industry for a long time. He's now very much into Internet of Things and new parts of the industry. But a great follower of what's going on, and I've always admired him. I didn't get the chance to give my speech to him the other night for some reason at the Lizzie's, which was down at Luna Park. But it was a good event, so well done to Stuart. The other part is that we've started with Graham Phillips, gathered a lot of information. A lot of people have written books about the industry. Even our friend Lou Richard wrote a book about what was going on in the VC space and the takeover space and everything else. And Sebastian Bold here, please stand up, there he is. He's gathering information at this point in time. Went to Sydney University. He's got some brochures over there, I believe, of different things that you can that you can go and get hold of. And sadly, when we lost Graham, and it wasn't a real loss. Graham, as we all know, was a real character. I always remember giving a speech, I think it was the merger of Burrows at Unimac, where when I went up, Graham was speaking, I was speaking, Dave knows. When I went up to do my speech, Graham had thrown my papers, which is always Graham. Graham, whenever I went anywhere around the world, Graham was always last on the plane. He was going other places, and he was a real character and personality. Sadly, he passed away last year, and Sebastian has picked up all of this material and now putting that into all sorts of different cases and stories. And a lot of it, Graham and I disagreed in a lot of areas. We'd always have big arguments and things like this. We had the numbers right, whether he had the numbers right, but a real character and personality, and we really love him and we miss him dearly. So when you looked at the different levels of history and activities that were taking place, it was a different day. And you take it today, the media is different. There's a big story this morning about venture capital being raised in Australia. There's also the story regarding what is going to happen with the Science Council. And if you look at the way the Science Council is picked up with Lassie and boys there, the driving force, Canva and WiseTech. WiseTech, John uses quite a lot at different big day events. And he's very good, he's very promotional. I remember one event he did where he's got this booklet on, and this is in front of about 800 students, maybe more. He's got this book and he said, if any of you've got good ideas, I'd love to hear them. I'd love to give you copies of the book. And they all said, well, how do we contact you? He said, there's the phone number. You can never do that to an audience of school kids today, because they've all got their own hot phones, and they all immediately ran. And it's unbelievable. He was staggered standing at the side, looking at ideas that these kids have got as to what they're going to do with technology. And I think the ACS Foundation does a tremendous job in that area. 5,000 to 8,000 students, I think, a year job, maybe more, attend these big day events, and they get good speakers from different countries talking about the industry, where it's going, what it's doing, and how we should be inspiring these young people. So when you look at this bottom area here, we've now had more publicity over the last few weeks over the skills crisis. The skills crisis here, the skills crisis there. It's not just on the vendor side, it's on the user side as well. We've got to have the right people, we've got to have the right people trained in all the new technologies and all the things that are happening at this point in time. It's not easy, it's somewhat complicated. The other thing that's erupted in the last 2 or 3 weeks has been the security. All of a sudden, we've got to move security out of the IT department, we've we've got to set up a security group, we've got to have the right people trained, we've got to know all about our right products and what are we doing with it. It's elevated, if you like, the level of technology up the ladder within a company. The boards and directors of companies, and they're very aware of issues that can take place which are related to security. So we've seen many of those. So when you look at this council, Tech Council of Australia, and you think about all the people there as members, and they recently launched a report which said about turning Australia into a regional technology hub. And I think that's very important. If you think about what are our skills, what are our industry activities like, where are we going, it's important for us to think about that and to be able to look at taking that and look at that, not just within Australia, we've got to take it worldwide. Australia is facing a lot of competition. A lot of competition coming from overseas. The skills issue, that's going to change a lot. The old professional services companies, they're moving into new areas, they're becoming partners. They're also looking at new areas like security. So there's lots of changes. So if you take the companies of today, we've got Atlassian, we've got Air wallets, we've got Altium. Altium is now very much set up in China, where they're going to go in the future, but they took their Australian operation, which came out of Tasmania, took that to China. Happen, another one, Bravura, Canva, Ultra, and Go on. It goes on and on. We've got Data 3, we've got Tech 1, we've got Nuance, we've got all sorts of different companies, objective. But we've got WASTEC. There's a big article on WASTEC this morning about the logistic industry worldwide and how important it is to the company like WASTEC. And that is tremendous, the way that company is going and where it's going in the future. We hear a lot about Atlassian. We invite the Atlassian people to come along to events like this. People say, what do they do? But when you look at it, it's a software company that builds platforms and tools for businesses. And their clients today include some of the biggest companies in the world. Now that was just down the road in the start, so that way first of all, and that's what that way. Moved offices. And they've now got NASA, they've got Netflix, they've got Toyota, Twitter, Facebook, and so and so, clients all around the world. So when we look at that, we, not all of us, but quite a few of us, we're seasoned and maybe been jaded as followers of the industry. And we're professionals, and still we come across vendors, we look at their products and services, we wonder where they are and where they're going, what are they doing, and we get that home feeling. It was announced last week of 3 companies, software companies that have moved into the mining industry. And it's to look at the products and services that are there. And if you think of the mining industry, it's got a ridiculous lot of ways. The way it gets that stuff is out. Not just operating out of Perth or wherever, they've got mines all over the place. The announcements this morning that we've got to open up coal mines, and we've got to do this, we've got to do that. More technology is going to be required to take that to the next level. So, the skills gap is one which I think is a big concern. That's the area that John is very aware of, and John is on top of that as to what we've got to do to build that demand. But the demand is changing, and it's about advancing computer science in all sectors of the industry. So a lot of it is around agriculture, chemical industry, the mining industry, healthcare industry, banking, social services, and more. It just goes on and on as to the areas that are needing people now to elevate their companies to a new level, to think about the new areas of change. And the more you look at data, you look at cloud, you look at security solutions, we need to be incorporating skills a lot faster than now. So to keep up with these types of skills requires tech staff to stay current and stay longer with organisations. There's a amount of resignations following COVID at this point in time, where people are moving on, looking for new jobs, new areas of opportunity. So the more I go, the more I think we do need people like yourselves to feed back into the industry as to what you think are important. What are the areas that you feel we should be thinking about, what experiences you've had in the past, and how do we inspire the future and make things a lot broader. You know, the press is different at this point. We don't have the media we used to have. We also have different views from different governments, what they think about technology. But getting those markets out there, really, we had John Button that was very much on our side. Several of you, I think, in the room here, when we went up to the Asia conference in Taiwan, whereby we were in disagreement between the various associations that attended representing Australia. We need to have that collaboration. We need to have that working together such that we can all see the benefits of something like Taiwan. John Button put a lot of money into that, and we got into all sorts of trouble because of the fight that the associations had in Taiwan. So we need to get that all back together again at this point. So all of that is to think about where we stand and think about the new technologies. We've seen a lot of changes over the years, and one wonders what's going to happen over the next year or the year after. And the more I think about this concept that they've taken in the UK, which has sort of inspired me, it really looks at a whole lot of new areas. It looks at the new programming areas. It looks at development. It looks at the use of low code. It looks at e-commerce and how the retail industry, finance industry, and everything else is changing and what is needed in that area. Payment systems. When you think about workplace productivity, that's something which is on both the vendor side and also the user side. So that needs to be addressed to be updated around. So there's a lot of things to be done, and we need a lot of support to take that to the next level. When we go back to the early days of the 70s and the 60s and the 50s, it's a fairly straightforward market. But there's a lot of legacy systems still from that period that have to be modernised and have to be taken forward. And we need the people with the right skills and the right experience to do that. So taking that to the next level is where everybody, a lot of the people in this room can contribute to it. So we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear comment. If any of you want interviews, we've got somebody now to do videos on that, and we'd love to come and talk to you and just ask simple questions, similar to what we did with the last report, where we got VIPs to comment. I think we had over 500 of them. We want to do that again, but under current terms, current environment, current markets, and the way things are and the way things are going and where they're changing. So with that, I'd say, Frank, it's back to you. He's pointing his finger at me. We've got a video to play, a very quick video, and I want you all to look at them and recognise the people that are on them. A lot of them we don't recognise them. We tried to get photographs of the videos. I think we've got 51, and we'll roll those through. Samantha did all this for us, which some are black and white, some are in colour, but it's inspiring to see the names and the people that suddenly pop up. You can cheer, you can move, you can do whatever you like. Now, a lot of them, legends in this room, which I'm sorry to say may not be included. And I think we'll go for a few minutes. Right, there you go. Want to get to that? And this is always a famous photograph of the Piercy group. Quite a few of us in this room are members of Piercy. I have a big event next week in photograph. Peter Jones. I love Jones. Who's that bloke? Anyway, it's here. There he is. Very strong in communication. Luke. Harley, you remember Luke? Yeah. And think about it, the equipment, everything we had back in the old days. Look at it. And this is Marie. And this is here. Yes. Bit more of a beard actually. Actually, that's an older photograph. When you think about the computer rooms and everything, I'm very active in the Piercy Foundation. Maybe with the markup. Doing very well, although he's pulling back at this point. No, he is. As you can see, David is one of our great ambassadors. He's still out there banging on the doors, giving lots of papers. Think of that environment. Who grew up like that? Running employee here. Beverly, one of our great. You look at this, you look at the older PCs and everything. We don't forget this guy, got a plain shirt on there. Shirt placing, orchestra. Good old Max. Love you, dear. John, tremendous job John's done with the ACS Foundation. Taking that to a lot of new levels. You go back again to the things that we used to play around with and try to fix. Back to where John Benson was a great. And you look at that period, you look at the mini computer, personal computer workstations, and everything we went through. David Hartley, still living in Bermuda or somewhere like that. And then he came off with the built trains. And he worked with Max. I've got some of the pictures wrong. No one's mentioned it. Barry is right. Would you recognise that? Kids, you know what they're up to. But it's a good cross section of pictures, computers, different systems, different styles, and so forth. We've been through over that. Proxy was that dear mate of ours. When you look back in PHP days, Neville the Devil, here he is. The picture Neville, Rudy, with his pipe, and used to be able to smoke the pipes in the office. Here's the boys. They appear more times than anything else. Neil's here. You recognise yourself here? There we are, the scene of today. Really look around. Kim does a tremendous job. Really. Salesforce now, she had a great article this week. Jody, engineering. Helen living in New York. John Mallett, who wrote the book. Great inspiration John had there. Here he is, the boy. You recognise him, Gary? Tom Medlington, Tom Lewis made lots of comments about the industry, different things that are going on. there's quite a few books that have come out and reports that we've had over the years. So that's just a few. So we'll leave it at that.
We'll take some questions.
Any questions? Anybody wants to volunteer with articles or after hearing from you? Yes. Yes.
Yeah, if you look at the book, AIQ by Paulson, modern computers are written in matrix technology. I made 3 of these systems in Holland, cut the amount of code down by about 90%. We're looking at converting these legacy systems. Should we be focusing on something like this matrix technology approach that everybody is using to make their systems?
Good point. Anybody want to comment on that? I'd like you to write that as a story. 200, 300 words. Less than that. It's a good story though. I think that's a good point. And that was sort of a, where was that overseas?
I lived in Holland for a long time.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? He lives in Tasmania, and Alan and I started IDG in 96 in Australia at the same time. Thanks. Alan was the editor of Computer World, and sent us 500,000 in those days to set up both of them, and it was a good operation. It was a good way of doing it. If you look at Computer World today, it's moved on from that to taken over by the Chinese, and then it's under the name of the Foundry Group. But Alan retired. He did correspond to the icons of the industry, and gave us a list of names as to people that he thought he liked and everything else. But he's not involved anymore. Yeah.
You're limited
Peter Hine.
your passion in the industry. What thing about your career, what development stage in the process?
Walking down York Street. It was interesting. I've always been involved in radar. I was in the Navy in the radar. Worked in New Zealand on telephone exchanges. Wandered around, cycled around, and then suddenly decided that the technology industry was going to do something. Walked down York Street and I suddenly realised who was in the computer industry. IBM in those days was in MLC building in North Sydney. They weren't in the Pagoda then, they moved in the Pagoda later on. But I went to GE, and GE was exciting. Working on the Opera House, working on the Hobart Race, doing all those sorts of things was very stimulating. A lot of things were happening, a lot of things were going on. We then decided with the mining boom that we needed to have faster systems. So we moved over to Compunet, which a lot of people at GE went to Compunet, and we ran that for 7 or 8 years, looking after the mining industry. So it's now nice to all the companies out of Kalgoorlie and things like that. And when you think about it, they used to send us their data, we'd have to punch it up and they'd send it back. It's crazy. The Opera House was a good example. It was a 5-minute turnaround. And they'd send up the data from the Opera House, we had to punch it into the machine, process the data, and take it back to the Opera House. I used to walk down with it because I used to love walking through the Opera House in the early stages of building the Opera House. It's quite stimulating. So, I think that was the interesting part of it. IDC I loved because of the travel and the executives that I met. We talked earlier on regarding Larry Ellison. We talked about the early Microsoft. All these people through IDC, we got to meet them either locally or around the world doing interviews. So all of that I found very interesting. I was never a journalist. So, yeah, there's many areas that I think you know, it was very interesting. But I always admire what you did with your side, your deep side, plain side. And part of this has come about through what we're talking about here, through Anthony Miller, who was here in Australia, who is now with the technology group in London, and he runs these sorts of events. As we all know, Anthony was a bit like Gary. He was rested the right occasions. You never knew what was going to walk through that door next. Us guys, whatever the good papers. Yeah, he loved doing it. So things change.
Can I give you a comment then?
Yeah.
When you're as generous and likely, I'm sure you
Yes.
you used an ASR 33 or something.
That's correct.
A teletype machine connected
Yes.
to your mainframe.
Yes.
And that was a big breakthrough. Not many of us could recognise at the time, because everyone used to put their program in and run it overnight, find a bug and have to wait 24 hours before another button. But they could go straight in and do a job and come back. And Bill Gates had that advantage. At the school he went to, his mother was involved with the Parents Association, and they installed an ASR 33 connected to a mainframe.
Yeah.
And he was able to do his programming in that way, and they got him started.
Yeah.
It was a big breakthrough. We didn't recognise at the time.
Interesting you talked about that teletype machine. We made one of those into a portable. But it was a portable with 2 or 3 of you had to carry. We took the legs off, we took everything else off. It's quite a machine. It's very interesting. I think so, Frank. Yes, you.
Lena's told me that this is probably his last presentation he's going to make, which is quite a pity anyway, but it does take a lot of effort putting it together. I especially want to thank his daughter, Sam, who helped. I apologise, you were up there somewhere. Come on. You are a legend. And the last slide. I'm actually going to give Len a bad warning. In 13 years' time, he is coming back to present again to celebrate his 100th birthday. Len, thank you. You're a true legend of the IT industry, and you're not a member of the ACS. Tell me what? You're still active in the industry, you're still attending briefings, you're still going to award dinners, you'll even go to the IT brief, especially if it's the radio magazine. You don't know when to stop. I actually think you don't know how to stop. I actually have a couple of words that you'll only one just keep walking your dog, keep walking and saying. Wish you well in the future. In terms of the lunches, it's been hard pulling this together because we only had about 50 people until about 6 weeks ago. We put it out a smaller group. I think things have changed. People feel a bit more confident getting closer to the event. And we weren't sure whether we've actually continued to want to run the next sort of lunch. We've got over 90 people here today, and I think that's a vote itself. That's a vote itself that says we want to continue with these lunches, at least while we can all get on public transport and stand and walk in the room and take a lift stuff. So let's continue it. Went hinted at the fact that some people don't want to be called old timers, and I've never been an old timer. I guess 70 is the new 50, and I'm happy with that. But what Len has finished up with is everyone in this room is an IT legend. And what I want to do is suggest that we actually rename this the Legends Lunch. And we go forward with that. And we continue to recognise that. Thank you. Enjoy your dessert. Enjoy the company. We'll see you next year. Thank you.